The internet didn't just react to the footage, it detonated. Within minutes of A$AP Rocky's performance clip surfacing online, timelines everywhere were flooded with the same frame, the same zoomed-in freeze, the same confused captions asking if people were seeing what they thought they were seeing. Nobody had full context, nobody had official clarification, but that didn't matter anymore. The moment had already escaped control. It had become something bigger than the concert, bigger than the tour, bigger than even the artist himself. And then came the part everyone was waiting for. Because when a moment like this hits hip-hop culture, there's one name people instinctively look for first: 50 Cent. It wasn't even a question of if he would respond. It was a question of how fast. Somewhere between the memes, the speculation, and the fan theories spiraling out of control, 50 Cent saw the clip, and the reaction was almost immediate. No press statement. No long explanation. No build-up. Just that familiar silence right before impact. The same pattern the internet has learned to recognize over the years. When 50 goes quiet for a moment, something is loading. And then it landed. A post. A caption. A tone so casual it almost felt accidental, but everybody knew it wasn't. That single reaction was enough to shift the entire conversation. Suddenly, it wasn't just about what happened on stage anymore. It was about what 50 Cent said it meant. His timing turned a random viral fashion controversy into a full-scale cultural moment. Comments exploded, reposts multiplied, and within hours, his response was trending alongside the original footage itself. Meanwhile, A$AP Rocky found himself at the center of a storm that had very little to do with music anymore. It was about perception. It was about image. And more importantly, it was about how quickly the internet can take an unverified moment and turn it into a global narrative. What should have been just another stop on the Don't Be Dumb tour suddenly became something else entirely. A digital battlefield of jokes, defenses, breakdowns, and think pieces. And right in the middle of it all stood one reaction that changed the temperature of the entire conversation. Because when 50 Cent speaks on a moment like this, the internet doesn't just listen. It amplifies. The footage didn't look like anything special at first glance. Just a live concert clip, shaky camera work, loud crowd noise, and the usual chaos that comes with arena performances. But within minutes of it hitting social media, people started slowing it down, zooming in, replaying it frame by frame, trying to understand what they were actually looking at. It didn't take long before the conversation shifted from "what song is this?" to something entirely different. And once that shift happened, there was no going back. At the center of it all was A$AP Rocky, currently deep into his highly anticipated Don't Be Dumb World Tour, a massive run that marked his long-awaited return to full-scale touring. The rollout itself had been treated like a victory lap. Years of delays, anticipation, fashion moments, and carefully curated performances finally coming together on a global stage. The tour wasn't just about music. It was about presence, style, reinvention. Rocky had always existed at the intersection of hip-hop and high fashion, and this tour was designed to reflect exactly that identity. From bold stage outfits to theatrical entrances, everything was built to be seen, photographed, and discussed. And that's exactly why the Baltimore stop became so important. The performance itself was strong. Fans inside the arena described the energy as electric, the setlist tight, and the production level elevated. But nobody in the building could have predicted that one brief visual moment, caught unintentionally on camera, would completely overshadow the entire night once it left the arena. Because once the clip escaped into the internet, context stopped mattering. Social media doesn't wait for confirmation. It doesn't pause for explanations. It reacts first and interprets later. And in this case, interpretation came in waves, each one louder than the last. Some viewers insisted there was nothing unusual at all, arguing it was just stage lighting, camera distortion, or a misunderstood angle. Others were convinced they had seen exactly what they thought they saw, and they doubled down immediately. Memes started appearing almost instantly, turning a serious performance moment into a joke format that spread faster than the original clip itself. But what made the situation explode even further was Rocky's existing public identity. He isn't an artist who blends into the background. He's built a reputation on standing out, on pushing boundaries that most mainstream rappers avoid entirely. Over the years, he's become as recognized for his fashion influence as his music catalog, regularly appearing at major fashion events, collaborating with luxury brands, and experimenting with gender-fluid style choices long before they became widely accepted in mainstream hip-hop culture. That reputation meant one thing: Every visual moment involving him carries weight. People don't just watch A$AP Rocky performances. They analyze them. So when the Baltimore clip surfaced, it didn't exist in isolation. It immediately got filtered through years of previous fashion moments, past interviews, runway appearances, and viral photo shoots. Every prior controversy, every bold outfit choice, every stylistic experiment was suddenly pulled back into the conversation as context. And that's when the internet narrative started to split. On one side were fans defending him, arguing that this was another example of how quickly people misinterpret fashion-forward performance art. They pointed to his long-standing philosophy about breaking traditional gender norms in clothing, his collaborations with high-end designers, and his history of intentionally provocative styling choices that were later praised in hindsight. On the other side were critics who felt the moment crossed a line, arguing that no matter how experimental his fashion identity is, there are still expectations tied to a hip-hop stage performance. For them, the debate wasn't about creativity. It was about appropriateness, image, and cultural perception. That divide is what turned a simple clip into a full-blown cultural argument. And then, as always happens in moments like this, the attention didn't stay contained to fans. It moved upward into the broader entertainment ecosystem. Blogs picked it up first, then commentary pages, then reaction channels. Within hours, the clip wasn't just a fan discussion, it was a trending topic across multiple platforms, each one adding its own framing, its own exaggeration, its own spin. By the time mainstream pages started covering it, the narrative had already mutated multiple times. Nobody was talking about just a performance anymore. They were talking about perception, about masculinity in hip-hop, about fashion boundaries, about what artists should or shouldn't wear on stage. And in the middle of that noise, another layer was quietly building, one that would completely change the trajectory of the story. Because whenever a viral moment reaches that level of saturation, there's always a second wave. A reaction, a counter-reaction, a personality big enough to shift the direction of the conversation with a single post. And in hip-hop culture, there are very few people who can do that instantly. One of them is 50 Cent. At first, he wasn't part of the story. He wasn't on stage, he wasn't in the clip, and he wasn't involved in the performance at all. But that's never been a requirement for him to enter a viral moment. All it takes is relevance, timing, and a target already under the spotlight. Because in the world of 50 Cent, he doesn't need to create the fire. He just needs to walk into it. The moment 50 Cent entered the conversation, the entire tone of the situation changed. Up until that point, the viral clip involving A$AP Rocky had been living in that familiar internet grey zone. Half joke, half debate, half confusion. Fans were still arguing about what they were even seeing. Commentators were still trying to frame it as either fashion experimentation or a misunderstanding, and the broader audience was mostly just entertained by the chaos. But then 50 Cent did what he's done countless times before. He stepped into a trending moment at exactly the right time, with exactly the right energy, and turned ambiguity into a headline. It wasn't a press conference. It wasn't an interview. It wasn't even a long caption explaining anything in detail. It was a post, simple, sharp, and timed in a way that felt almost surgical. The kind of reaction that doesn't try to convince anyone of anything, but instead reframes the entire situation through humor, sarcasm, and implication. And that's where the conflict actually began. Because 50 Cent doesn't just comment on viral moments, he redefines them. Within minutes of his reaction circulating, the conversation around Rocky's performance stopped being about interpretation and started being about reaction to the reaction. People who hadn't even seen the original clip were now engaging with 50's post first, then going back to search for the footage. That shift alone changed the power dynamic of the entire story. Suddenly, the internet wasn't debating what happened on stage. It was debating what 50 Cent meant by what he said about it. And that's when the first real fracture appeared. Rocky's supporters immediately pushed back. They argued that the moment was being taken out of proportion, that 50 Cent was intentionally amplifying something trivial for engagement, and that the entire situation was being reduced to a meme instead of being understood in context. To them, it wasn't just about a viral clip anymore. It was about respect for artistic expression and the way internet culture distorts moments involving celebrities who already sit at the intersection of music and fashion. On the other side, 50 Cent's audience saw it completely differently. For them, this was exactly what he does best. They viewed his reaction as part of a long-running tradition of hip-hop commentary where humor, exaggeration, and public critique all blend into one performance. In their eyes, he wasn't attacking Rocky, he was participating in the culture in real time, reacting the same way millions of others were reacting, just louder and more visible. That divide created the first true conflict layer of the story. But underneath the fan reactions, something else was happening. The narrative was being reshaped by momentum. Every repost of 50 Cent's reaction brought new attention back to the original clip. Every meme referencing his post added another layer of interpretation. Every commentary video dissected not just the footage, but the relationship between the two artists' public personas. And with each cycle, the story drifted further away from the actual performance and deeper into cultural analysis. At this point, the Baltimore show was no longer just a concert stop. It had become a symbol. A symbol of how quickly fashion-forward performance art can be misread in the digital age. A symbol of how internet personalities can redirect global attention with a single post. And a symbol of how hip-hop, as a culture, still wrestles with internal disagreements about masculinity, style, and public image. But the first twist came when something unexpected happened in the middle of the chaos. Instead of calming the situation, the attention kept escalating, but not in the way anyone anticipated. Fan pages began resurfacing older clips of Rocky's past fashion moments, runway appearances, Met Gala outfits, interviews where he openly discussed breaking traditional gender expectations in clothing. What started as a reaction to a single performance suddenly turned into a full archive of his entire aesthetic philosophy being re-examined under a microscope. And that's where the story took its first sharp turn. Because what initially looked like a one-night viral controversy started transforming into something much bigger, a long-running cultural argument being reignited through a single moment. Meanwhile, 50 Cent's reaction continued to spread, but something subtle shifted in how people engaged with it. It was no longer just funny or controversial. It became a reference point, a lens, a way to interpret everything else happening around the situation. Even people who didn't usually follow hip-hop commentary were now aware of the moment, not because of Rocky, and not because of the original clip, but because of 50 Cent's framing of it. That is where the real conflict crystallized. Because in internet culture, whoever defines the joke often controls the narrative. And in this case, 50 Cent had already done it before anyone else even had time to agree on what they were looking at. But just as the situation seemed like it was stabilizing into a predictable cycle of memes, reactions, and commentary, a new layer emerged that complicated everything again. Reports and fan discussions began splitting into two distinct narratives. One defending the idea that the moment was being blown out of proportion, and another insisting that it reflected a deeper tension within hip-hop's evolving identity. The conversation was no longer just about Rocky's outfit or 50 Cent's reaction. It had expanded into a broader debate about what modern hip-hop performance even represents. And that's when the first real twist hit the mainstream perception of the story. Because instead of fading after the initial viral spike, the controversy grew legs. Every attempt to clarify it only added more interpretations. Every new meme added another angle. Every reaction video pulled in more audiences who weren't even originally part of the conversation. At this stage, both artists were locked into roles they didn't fully choose. Rocky became the symbol of artistic experimentation under scrutiny. 50 Cent became the symbol of internet commentary turning into cultural force. And between them stood an audience that was no longer just watching the moment unfold, they were actively shaping it in real time. By the end of the first wave of escalation, one thing was clear. This was no longer just a viral clip. It was a narrative war. And the internet had only just begun to decide who it was going to believe. As the debate refused to settle, the situation didn't just continue. It escalated into something far more unpredictable. What started as a viral clip involving A$AP Rocky and a wave of interpretations had already been reshaped by 50 Cent into a cultural talking point. But now, the internet had entered a second phase, the investigation phase. And that's when everything started to spiral. Fan pages, commentary accounts, and reaction channels weren't just reposting the clip anymore, they were dissecting it. Frame-by-frame breakdowns began circulating, with users zooming into every angle, every shadow, every movement on stage. What was once a 10-second moment had turned into hours of analysis across TikTok, X, and YouTube. At first, it looked like typical internet overreaction. But then the tone shifted. People started noticing inconsistencies. Different uploads of the same footage didn't match perfectly. Audio seemed slightly altered in some versions. Lighting differences between clips sparked theories that there might have been multiple recordings from different sources, or even different edits circulating at the same time. That's when the speculation exploded again. Some users claimed the viral version had been selectively cropped. Others insisted that the original context was missing key seconds before and after the moment everyone was focusing on. A few even argued that the entire narrative being built online was based on an incomplete interpretation of a single angle. The conversation stopped being about fashion, humor, or reaction. It became about truth. And just as the noise reached its peak, a new piece of content surfaced that changed everything. A second clip appeared online, this time from a different angle inside the arena. The uploader was anonymous, the account newly created, and the timing suspiciously perfect. No explanation was provided, just raw footage from what appeared to be a different section of the venue during the same performance. At first, people assumed it would confirm the original interpretation. It didn't. Instead, it complicated it. The new angle showed that the moment everyone had been discussing was partially obscured by movement on stage and shifting lighting effects. What looked clear in one version appeared far less defined in another. The detail that had fueled thousands of memes and reactions suddenly became ambiguous again. The internet split instantly for the second time. One group claimed the new footage proved the original outrage was exaggerated. Another insisted it was proof that something had been intentionally hidden or downplayed. And a third group argued that both clips were being misinterpreted due to low quality and emotional bias. But the real shock wasn't the footage itself. It was what came next. Shortly after the second clip gained traction, a post appeared from an account claiming to be connected to someone working backstage during the tour. The message was vague, but it hinted that what the public saw online was only a fragment of a larger performance setup, suggesting that camera angles, staging design, and wardrobe layering all played a role in how the moment appeared from different perspectives. The post didn't confirm anything outright, but it introduced doubt. And in viral culture, doubt spreads faster than facts. Within an hour, the post was everywhere, even after the account that posted it was deleted. Screenshots circulated, translations were added, and interpretations multiplied. People began treating the message as either a hidden explanation or a deliberate attempt to cover something up. Meanwhile, 50 Cent re-entered the conversation in his own way. Another reaction appeared. Short, sharp, and instantly viral. Not a breakdown, not an analysis, just a continuation of his original tone. But this time, the reaction didn't just add humor. It added finality, as if he was sealing the narrative rather than just commenting on it. And that's when the escalation reached its peak. Because now, three things were happening at once. The original clip was being questioned. The alternate footage was being debated. And the most influential voice in the viral cycle had doubled down on his interpretation. That combination created something the internet thrives on but rarely resolves: uncertainty with momentum. At the same time, discussions around A$AP Rocky began to shift again. Supporters emphasized his long history of experimental fashion, pointing out that his entire career has been built on challenging visual norms in hip-hop and blending high fashion with streetwear in ways that often spark controversy before acceptance. Critics, however, framed the situation differently. For them, this wasn't about fashion innovation anymore, it was about perception management. They argued that once a moment enters viral circulation, the artist loses control of how it's interpreted, regardless of intent. And that is where the shocking reveal began to form, not as a single confirmed truth, but as a collapse of certainty itself. Because as more clips emerged, more commentary flooded in, and more reactions layered on top of each other, one reality became unavoidable. There was no longer a single version of the moment that everyone agreed on. Instead, there were multiple competing narratives, each supported by different fragments of evidence, each amplified by different communities, each shaped by different biases. And right in the middle of that fragmentation, 50 Cent's reaction continued to dominate engagement metrics, acting like a gravitational force pulling every version of the story back into one centralized meme-driven interpretation. But then came the most unexpected development yet. A widely shared repost of the original clip, one that had been circulating for hours, was suddenly removed without explanation from several major platforms. No official statement followed. No clarification was given. It simply disappeared from timelines where it had been trending. That deletion sparked a new wave of theories. Was it copyright enforcement? Mislabeling? Or something more intentional? Nobody had a clear answer. And that uncertainty pushed the situation into its most unstable phase yet. Because now the question wasn't just what happened during the performance. It was why different versions of the moment were appearing and disappearing so quickly. And with that realization, the entire story shifted again, from a viral reaction into something that felt much harder to pin down. The moment the clip fully escaped its original context, the reaction stopped belonging to the concert and started belonging to the internet. What had been a live performance moment involving A$AP Rocky was now being interpreted, reinterpreted, and overanalyzed across every major platform in real time. And once 50 Cent entered the conversation with his reaction, the scale of attention multiplied instantly. The story was no longer just about what people thought they saw, it became about what everyone thought it meant. Across social media, the response fractured almost immediately into competing narratives. One side treated the moment as pure internet exaggeration, pointing out how quickly small visual details get blown out of proportion when a clip goes viral. They argued that people were reacting more to captions, edits, and commentary than the actual footage itself. Another group leaned into the humor and chaos of it all. For them, it was just another example of how unpredictable live performance culture can be when it meets meme culture. They reposted edits, reaction videos, and exaggerated breakdowns, treating the entire situation like entertainment rather than controversy. But there was also a more serious layer forming underneath the noise. Some viewers started focusing on how quickly assumptions were made without confirmation, highlighting how modern viral culture often replaces clarity with speed. In their view, the real story wasn't the clip, it was how fast interpretation became fact in public perception. Inside fan communities surrounding A$AP Rocky, the tone was more protective and emotionally invested. Supporters emphasized his long-standing identity as a fashion-forward artist who has consistently pushed boundaries in style, performance, and presentation. They pointed out that his career has always existed in spaces where visual experimentation is expected, not criticized. To them, the reaction wasn't about the moment itself, it was about how quickly it was being used to define him in a narrow way. They felt the narrative was stripping away years of artistic identity and reducing it to a single viral frame. Meanwhile, casual viewers, people without strong attachment to either side, were engaging with the situation in a completely different way. For them, it was fast-moving content, something to watch, share, comment on, and move past. The speed of the cycle meant that attention shifted rapidly from confusion to jokes to new theories, without ever settling on one interpretation. The entry of 50 Cent into this environment intensified that cycle even further. His reaction didn't just add commentary, it added authority in the eyes of many users. Even people who didn't fully understand the original context were now engaging with the situation through his framing of it. That influence became a key part of the discussion itself. Some argued that his involvement was simply part of internet culture, another example of how celebrities engage with viral content in real time. Others believed it showed how easily a single influential voice can redirect the tone of a global conversation, especially when humor and timing align perfectly. Outside of fan spaces, industry observers began analyzing something broader than the clip itself. The focus shifted toward how modern entertainment ecosystems operate. Live performances are no longer isolated events, they are content generators. Every movement on stage can become a standalone viral moment once recorded, clipped, and distributed. This means artists like A$AP Rocky operate in an environment where every visual choice is potentially permanent. A moment that lasts seconds in real life can live for years online, repeatedly resurfacing in different contexts, edits, and interpretations. Some commentators highlighted how this creates a unique challenge for artists who already rely heavily on visual identity. In Rocky's case, his entire brand is built on fashion experimentation, aesthetic disruption, and blending high fashion with hip-hop culture. That same strength also makes him more vulnerable to misinterpretation when isolated moments are taken out of context. At the same time, the reaction from meme culture completely changed the speed and direction of the narrative. What might have remained a niche discussion among fans and critics instead became a global joke cycle. Edited clips, reaction screenshots, and exaggerated commentary formats spread faster than any clarifying information could catch up. And once that meme layer formed, it became self-sustaining. Even people who had never seen the original footage were now participating in the conversation through reposts of jokes, reactions, and commentary about the reaction itself. In the middle of all this, 50 Cent's role became even more central. His reaction was no longer just a response, it had become a reference point. a shortcut for how to interpret the entire situation. His presence effectively anchored the conversation in humor and commentary, ensuring that the narrative remained active far longer than it might have otherwise. Within industry circles, there was also quiet recognition of how quickly narratives like this can override planned promotional cycles. For an artist in the middle of a major tour like A$AP Rocky, attention is usually expected to focus on music, performances, and creative output. But viral culture doesn't follow those boundaries. It prioritizes what spreads fastest, not what was intended to be highlighted. That disconnect between intention and perception became one of the defining characteristics of the entire reaction. Even as the discussion continued evolving, one thing remained consistent. No single version of the story was fully dominant. Instead, multiple interpretations coexisted at the same time, each reinforced by different communities, platforms, and personalities. And in that fragmented space, both A$AP Rocky and 50 Cent existed not just as individuals, but as symbols inside a much larger internet-driven narrative, one shaped less by facts and more by speed, reaction, and repetition. The conversation had already burned through every predictable stage: confusion, memes, backlash, analysis, and counter-analysis. Most viral moments would have faded by now, replaced by the next trending clip. But this one refused to die down. If anything, it kept mutating. At the center of it all was still A$AP Rocky, whose tour continued moving city to city, while the internet kept replaying a single fragment of one night as if it contained a hidden answer everyone was trying to extract. And every time engagement slowed, 50 Cent would reappear in the timeline again, either through reposts, reactions, or quotes that reignited the entire cycle. But then something happened that changed the direction of the conversation completely. Late one night, a new angle of the same performance surfaced online. At first, nobody paid much attention to it. The account behind it was unfamiliar, with no history and no previous uploads. That alone made people suspicious, but curiosity spread faster than doubt. Within minutes, the clip was everywhere. And this version didn't match the others. It wasn't just a different crop or lighting difference. The angle revealed parts of the stage that hadn't been visible before. Movements that were previously hidden now appeared in frame. And most importantly, the exact moment everyone had been debating looked different. Not clearer. Not more dramatic. Just fundamentally less certain. That uncertainty immediately split the internet again. One group insisted this new footage proved the entire viral interpretation had been exaggerated from the beginning. They argued that people had been reacting to incomplete visuals, stitched edits, and emotionally charged commentary rather than what actually happened in real time. Another group pushed back harder than ever. To them, the new clip didn't resolve anything. It deepened the mystery. They pointed out that even with a wider angle, the key moment still wasn't fully visible, leaving just enough ambiguity for speculation to continue. And then a third group emerged, focused less on the clip itself and more on its timing. They questioned how, after days of circulation, a new angle suddenly appeared from nowhere. That alone, they argued, suggested either delayed release, intentional withholding, or something else happening behind the scenes that hadn't been disclosed. That theory spread quickly, because in viral culture, timing is never neutral. As the new footage circulated, attention shifted again toward how quickly narratives had formed in the first place. People began revisiting the original reaction wave, including the moment when 50 Cent first responded. His commentary, which had initially felt like a punchline to a viral joke, was now being re-examined as a force that shaped interpretation before facts were fully established. Some users argued that his reaction had locked in a specific reading of the moment before audiences even had time to process it themselves. Others dismissed that idea entirely, saying he was simply reacting to what everyone else was already laughing about. But the debate itself revealed something important. The story was no longer about the clip. It was about control of perception. And that's when the second twist arrived. A post appeared briefly from a verified associated account linked to entertainment media coverage. It didn't confirm anything directly, but it hinted that multiple versions of the event were circulating internally before the footage ever went public. The wording was vague, but it suggested that what the internet saw might not have been the first or only representation of the moment. Within minutes, the post was edited, then partially deleted, then reshared through screenshots as users tried to preserve what had been changed. That sequence alone was enough to send the conversation into another spiral. Was it miscommunication? Damage control? or simply misinformation spreading through fragmented sources? No one could agree. And while all of this unfolded, the silence from both camps, no clear statement, no full explanation, no definitive breakdown, became its own form of communication. The absence of clarity created space for interpretation to grow unchecked. Meanwhile, the role of 50 Cent in the narrative shifted again. His earlier reaction was no longer just a viral joke. It had become a reference point people kept returning to as they tried to make sense of the situation. Some viewed it as the moment the story stopped being neutral. Others saw it as simply one of many reactions in an already chaotic cycle. But regardless of interpretation, it anchored the conversation in a way nothing else did. Even neutral observers began noticing a pattern. Every time the discussion cooled, something tied back to his response would bring it back to the surface. And that is what made the final moment of the night so unexpected. A short, cryptic message appeared on an anonymous account that had not been active before or since. It read, "Don't trust the first angle, or the second." No name, no context, no follow-up. Within minutes, the account disappeared completely. That single post reignited everything. People began rewatching every available clip, comparing angles, replaying edits, and trying to identify what third version could possibly mean. The idea that there were multiple unseen perspectives, or deliberately hidden footage, turned speculation into obsession. And then, just as quickly as it escalated, another shift occurred. A major entertainment page hinted that an official breakdown or clarifying release might be coming soon, but the teaser was vague enough to raise more questions than answers. Even that post was edited shortly after publication, as if multiple hands were shaping the message in real time. By this point, the situation had fully detached from its origin. It was no longer about a performance moment. It was no longer even about interpretation. It had become a layered internet event driven by fragments, reactions, missing context, and constantly shifting versions of the same scene. And at the center of it all, two figures remained locked in the cycle, not as participants, but as symbols. One representing artistic expression under scrutiny, the other representing reaction culture at full force. But even that framing felt temporary, because the final question the internet couldn't stop repeating was no longer about what happened on stage. It was about what had been removed from view. And right as the conversation seemed like it might finally stabilize, a new clip began circulating again, this time labeled as original uncut source. But before anyone could verify where it came from, or whether it was real, it vanished from multiple platforms almost instantly. The noise hasn't settled, it's just changed shape. Every time the conversation around A$AP Rocky starts to cool down, something new pulls it right back into the spotlight. Different clips, different interpretations, different angles, but no single version that everyone agrees on. And that's exactly why this moment hasn't faded the way most viral stories usually do. At the same time, 50 Cent remains one of the most influential voices in how the internet is interpreting it all. Whether people agree with him or not, his reaction became part of the story itself, something people keep referencing, debating, and using as a lens to understand the entire situation. But even with all the commentary, memes, breakdowns, and theories, one thing is still missing: a clear, final version of events that removes the guesswork. Instead, what exists right now is a mix of perspectives, each one claiming to be closer to the truth than the others. And that's where things get interesting. Because at this point, the conversation isn't just about a clip anymore. It's about how quickly perception forms online, how fast narratives take shape, and how hard it becomes to separate reaction from reality once everything starts spreading. So now the question shifts away from the platforms and back to the audience watching it all unfold. Do you think this entire moment has been exaggerated by internet culture and meme cycles? Or is there something deeper behind all the conflicting versions still circulating? Drop your thoughts, because every new interpretation adds another layer to a story that still doesn't feel finished. And if another update drops, another clip surfaces, or another reaction resets the conversation again, it's going to change the direction all over again. For now, the only thing left to do is stay tuned, stay aware, and watch closely, because this isn't over yet.